Welcome everyone. My name is Van Ta Park and I'm faculty at UCSF. And on behalf of the CARE team, we are super excited, as Dolores mentioned, to share with everyone about what CARE is. And we hope that CARE will be helpful to you in your research projects. So without further ado, we can go to the next slide. And so just in terms of how sort of housekeeping, I suppose, if people have questions or comments, you can certainly feel free to use the chat. We do have a couple of opportunities for more of a discussion in terms of the Q&A, as you can see here on the agenda. So we'll start off with talking about, well, what CARE is. Some of you are familiar with CARE, but most of you perhaps not. And we'll also talk about the data, the recruitment data access protocol as well. And then we'll have our first mini Q&A and raffles. And then Dr. Grill will talk about how to use CARE, and followed by a panel discussion with a few of our CARE research and community partners. So why don't, and then we'll go have a second raffle, our final Q&A and third raffle, and then we'll adjourn. So I've already introduced myself. Perhaps the speakers can introduce themselves. Josh, would you like to go introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Josh Grill. I'm a faculty member at UC Irvine and a co-investigator on CARE.
Thank you. And then is Joon on yet?
Hi, this is Joon.
Can you introduce yourself, Joon?
Yeah, sorry. Sorry for being late. Hi, my name is Joon. I'm President and CEO of the National Asian Pacific Center on Aging. Josh, I'm really impressed by your outfit. I was thinking about wearing a button down too, but I just figured not. But so apologies for that. But it's great to be here with you all.
Thanks, Joon. Quyen?
Hi, my name is Quyen. I'm the Executive Director of ICAN, the Vietnamese partner in this important CARE registry.
And then Dolores?
Hi, everyone. I'm Dolores Gallagher-Thompson, and I'm an emeritus professor from Stanford, but very active in the caregiving field. And I'm a co-investigator with Van and the others on this project. Very excited to be part of it.
And we also have, I think, a couple other co-investigators here. Janice?
Hi, everyone. So glad to be here. I'm Janice So. I'm a professor in School of Medicine, UCSF, and psychiatry and behavioral sciences. And I'm one of the co-investigators on the team. Glad to see you all.
And Wayne?
Hi, everyone. It's good to be here. I'm Wayne Meyer. I'm an assistant professor at UC Davis in the Department of Neurology and one of the co-investigators on this project.
Okay. I can't see everyone on the screen, so are there other co-investigators on the call? Okay. So yeah, why don't we move to the next slide then? Okay. So again, we'll start off with talking about what CARE is, give a brief intro. I know some of you are familiar with CARE, but for those of you who are not, we'll talk about what CARE is and how we came about developing CARE, and we'll also talk about the recruitment data access protocol. So here are the major partners for CARE. I think, yeah, everyone already introduced themselves, and so we can go to the next slide. So we don't have everybody's logos, but if you go, we do have about a couple of dozen community partners and research partners as well. And so the partners here, most of them serve on our community advisory board, which is really integral for CARE. and we go to our community advisory board for many things for feedback, whether it be messaging and or strategies for recruitment, as well as, of course, help with outreach. And we also consulted our community advisory board about the recruitment data access protocol as well. So we're very grateful for the work of our advisory board, and finally launched this Care Brain Trust meeting as well together. Next slide. Okay, so the next few slides are just really a background kind of slide, so I won't spend too much time on it, but I do want to provide a little bit of context in case you're not familiar about AAPIs and Alzheimer's and caregiving. So for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, or AAPI for short, they are really a heterogeneous population that comprise of many groups, cultural groups, and languages and dialects. There are diverse, populations with diverse histories, especially when it comes to immigration and the historical context of their experiences here in the U.S. as well. Asian Americans are the fastest growing racial group in the United States, and comprise about 7% of the U.S. population. So, it's really important that we, for care, we do outreach and meaningful engagement with this population. Okay. Next slide, please. So some of you might be aware or know about this article that was published last year, I believe. As you can see here, clinical research projects focusing on AAPI participants that are funded by the NIH was actually less than 1%. And I believe the exact percentage was 0.17%. So not even 1% of its total budget between 1992 and 2018. And in the previous slide, you saw that AAPIs comprise of 7% of the population and are the fastest growing racial population in the United States. So clearly there is a disparity there. And then most participants in the industry-sponsored industry-sponsored AD research were also Caucasian, and again, less than 1% were Asian. So, we won't discuss all the kinds of challenges or barriers when it comes to recruitment for AAPI, but things to consider include the fact that we all have cultural differences. There are linguistic limitations, and especially when you're recruiting older AAPI, many of older AAPI have limited English proficiency, and even if they are fluent in English, we have found that many prefer to speak their own or non-English language, and so those are considerations that all researchers need to bear in mind. And also, when it comes to research itself, what is research? Why is it important to participate in research? What are the different kinds of topics of research, such as Alzheimer's disease and other aging and caregiving related topics? We need to do a better job when it comes to education and outreach and providing the knowledge and information about all of this, so then the community members can make an informed decision about, okay, I get it. I understand what research is, and I understand why I have to participate in research. And so, so those are all things that we need to address in order to help address the disparity in research participation for AAPI. Next. So one area that is pretty important for care is caregiving. And just to provide a little bit about family caregiving for AAPIs, according to research, AAPIs more than any other group believe that caring for parents was expected of them. And also AAPI families are less likely to put their older family members into a facility. So they're more likely to stay at home in the family unit. And it's very common to also have a multi-generational household, or even if you're not all living in the same household, for different members of different generations, or members of different generations to come and care for the older family member. And 42% of APIs were caring for an older adult versus just 22%. So, quite a big difference there. Next slide, please. Okay, so here, this is how we, you can probably understand now why we have care. Care is really meant to pave the way for meaningful inclusion of AAPI in research. We hope that care can help to address the gap and reduce disparities in research participation for AAPI, with a special focus on Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, or ADRD for short, aging, caregiving, and other health issues across the lifespan among AAPI. And in fact, our theme is health across the lifespan, as you probably saw on the first slide. Again, to take into account the fact that APIs tend to, or members of multiple generations tend to care for their family members, and as well as the fact that APIs have collectivist values. So we felt like, in consultation with our community advisory board, health across the lifespan would be an important theme to have for care. And so care was established so we can implement culturally appropriate and innovative recruitment strategies with our community partners across California. And we have a really big goal. Our goal is to recruit 10,000 AAPI, but we don't want to just recruit 10,000 AAPI into the registry. We also want to have this registry be sustainable for many researchers and for many, many years. And I hope that the registry will continue to exist even after I retire, and can be a useful tool for the younger generations of researchers and community partners. And so, this is really our message, that we really want to have the meaningful inclusion of API in research, and we hope this registry, this recruitment registry, will play a big, important role in that. Next slide, please. So just to go over who enrolls in care, who's eligible to enroll in care. You have to self-identify as AAPI. You have to be an adult, and why 18 years old? Again, because an 18-year-old or a young adult could be a caregiver, right, for an older adult. You have to be able to speak and read English, Chinese, Korean, or Vietnamese. These are our initial target languages, given that these respective populations do have a high percent of limited English proficient persons or in the population. We do hope that one day we can expand to include other languages, such as Hindi and Tagalog, etc. And so we just wanted to explain our rationale. We're just starting out, so these are the languages that we decided to focus on initially. And of course, you have to express an interest in participating in potential research. So you are giving permission to CARE to share your recruitment information, or your recruitment information, which we'll get into momentarily, with potential researchers and community partners. Now, you don't have to, the participant doesn't have to consent to participate in all research, obviously, but they are providing permission to be contacted. So the CARE survey itself, it is an online survey. So if you visit our website, if you haven't had a chance to do so, please do. It's a multilingual website. It is an online survey. However, we do have a toll-free hotline number that's available from NAPCA, our partner, National Asian Pacific Center on Aging, in the different languages. If people prefer to answer the questions by phone. We also have had limited in-person opportunities for people to complete the survey as a hard copy. But as everyone knows, with COVID, that in-person recruitment and outreach has been limited right now. And obviously the enrollment survey is available in all the 5 languages here, and participants have the option of receiving a $10 gift card after completing the survey. Not everyone actually accepts, the gift card. So next slide, please. Okay, so what kinds of questions do we ask? We won't, share the line by line, just sort of the general categories. We ask socio-demographic questions. We ask about health conditions. We ask about health behaviors. And we also ask about caregiving experiences. So in terms of caregiving, we ask if they care for an older adult. We also ask if they care for other individuals, such as persons with special needs or minor children as well, actually. Next slide, please. So we just want to provide a very brief snapshot of where we are with CARE in terms of enrollment and who are on our registry so far. You can see here that as of January 9th, a couple weeks ago, we enrolled about 1,400 folks. And I believe the full launch of CARE started at the end of October, maybe October 27th. I can't remember the exact date, but around that time. So we're doing pretty well so far with enrollment, and we hope that we continue to do well so we can reach our target number of 10,000 and even possibly more. And you can see here that we have a high proportion who identify as Vietnamese, Chinese, Korean, and etc. So just wanted to let everyone know in this meeting that we do have targeted outreach efforts so we can improve on our number and proportions for the other populations, such as Asian Indians and Japanese and Samoans, etc. So we anticipate and hope that those numbers or in respective proportion will increase over time especially in the next several months of targeted outreach. So you can see here the mean age is 46 with a range of 18 to 92. About 2/3 are female. About 3 in 10 have limited English proficiency. And you can see what language they chose to complete the survey in here. And many of the CARE participants were born outside the US, and about 11% reported that they are caregivers of older adults. Next slide, please. Okay, so now going into the CARE supported recruitment flowchart. This is a nice visual, which I really want to thank our staff for creating this to help people visualize the steps for how to request access to the recruitment data. And so we'll go, the next slide will go would be a zoom in of some of this flow chart. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of the first 3 steps, first you would need to submit a care referral request form, and after this meeting, we will post that onto our website. And this is a required component of, the process of requesting the recruitment data. And then in this form, which you can see a screenshot of on the slide, you'll just have to put your name, everything like that, project title, description, timing, describe the eligibility of your participants that you want to recruit, the target sample size for your study. And one thing that you will need to do is identify CARE as a recruitment source for your studies and get IRB approval for that. And if you have a funding source, identifying what that is. It's not necessary, but it's just information for us. And then once the committee reviews, we will reach out to you. We will review what you have submitted, and we may or may not request a meeting, but actually, I think that we decided to require this part for now, but a meeting will be scheduled with everybody, and it may or may not be long. That's what I'm trying to say. So it may be brief because your study might be pretty clear, and we might not have questions. But if there are questions from either side, from the CARE consultation team or committee, or even from you, you might have questions about how best to, how CARE can best help your recruitment, right? So we could have that kind of meeting or a discussion as well. And then a decision will be made about how to move forward. And we will communicate with you the expectations as well. And so you will, submit request form you'll submit the official request form once you've had the consultation. Next slide, please. And then finally, for steps 4 and 5, CARE will provide you with the participant contact information. In the registry, we ask the participants for their preferred contact information. So some people might have said, oh, I only want to be contacted by email, or I only want to be contacted by phone, or even mailing address. But some people might have checked all boxes. So we'll provide what they have indicated in the registry survey to be able to give to potential researchers and community partners. And then we will need the IRB approval letter on hand from your institution before we can give you the information. And just for community partners who would like to access or request access to CARE, we can also work with you to help identify research partners, and including ourselves, including CARE investigators. So, it could be, Josh Grill from UC Irvine, could be Janice So from UCSF, or Wayne Meyer from Davis, or myself as well. And then for the researchers who would like to help, maybe this is not an area that you're used to, but you want to get into in terms of community-based participatory research, and you want some help with identifying community partners, we are happy to have those kinds of consultations as well. As you can know from the name of collaborative approach, it's really important to us for CARE that we encourage community academic partnerships. So that's, again, we're happy to help with that. And of course, you can probably contact any number of folks in our community advisory board as well to partner with them. So the last step here is comprised of the investigator responsibilities. Once we provide you with the list of the potential participants, we do require that you contact them within a month of receiving their contact information. Now, that might vary depending on the study design. So it's not a hard requirement. It just depends on what your particular study design is. But the idea is that once you receive the contact information, is that you're not sitting on it, basically, because especially if as we're having multiple requests, we would want to make sure that the list that we gave to you is being used. So you're contacting them. And then we do need to know about your outcome for every participant. So for example, which participant were you able to successfully contact? Which participant agreed to talk to you and got screened and were eligible? And then, so all those kinds of information and data are important to us. We are trying to maintain a registry of sort of active participants who are still willing to remain as care registry participants as well. Some people might change their mind in a couple of years, for example, right? So we need to know all that information so we can maintain a great and sustainable registry. And then once your study is done and you do, your publications and presentations, we would like to receive a copy of that so we can share it, with the public and post it on our website. Next slide, please. Okay. So just to, recap, and I think I said some of this already, the guidelines that we just presented and the visual that you just saw is primarily for prospective and in-person studies. So, but everything will be, discussed on a case-by-case basis. Okay, and here we are with Q&A. So do we have any questions, or should we do the raffle first? I don't know, but do we have any questions so far? This is the first opportunity for questions in terms of an in-depth discussion, but we'll have a lot of time at the end of the presentation as well.
We received a couple of questions, and number one is whether this recording of this webinar will be available.
Yes.
And it will be available on the CARE website, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, and then we also have another question from Sammy. Is career or educational background recorded in the registry?
Yes, we do ask about education as part of the socio-demographics.
Okay, great, thank you.
We have another question from T. Could we refuse to answer educational background?
Yes, so you're not required to answer that particular question, right? Other questions? Okay, so why don't we go to Josh?
Great, thank you, Van. So we can bring on my slides. I have just a few slides, and I want to echo Van's welcome to everyone and gratitude for your interest in care. It's been a labor of love, I would say, to work with this really fantastic team. It's a true collaborative team science approach to trying to do something really important, and I and our folks here at UC Irvine are honored to be a part of it. And we're grateful to NIA as well for, supporting care, but I think maybe more importantly, creating this new mechanism to fund science around how to best recruit people into aging and ADRD research. So it's a really exciting time. So we thought it would be helpful to just offer some hypotheticals and examples about how an investigator might use care to further their research. And in the next slide, I give an overview of the ways that we came up with, but I'm going to walk through each of these quickly, and I'm not going to take too much time to do this, but basically, we think that people could use care in a variety of ways, including that you could sort of send your data collection into the registry and try to collect it in the electronic space in which people enroll in care. That could include surveys where you pull a subsection of people in care, or it could be surveys where you try to get as many people from care as possible. But certainly the way registries are most frequently used, and it's important to say that there are many registries around the country, and this is a major source of investment in trying to accelerate aging and ADRD research around the country. So the more traditional approach to using registries to accelerate research is to recruit people into your prospective study. And you might imagine there are a handful of different ways that you could go about doing this. You could try to simply use care as one of many sources of recruitment to your study, trying to increase the representativeness and generalizability of your sample by being more inclusive and ensuring that AAPI are included. Or it may be that really AAPI is a primary research question for you and wanting to know whether a particular group differs from another group. So let me walk through each of these really quickly and give a few more examples. So on the next slide, I go back to doing research, if you will, in care rather than pulling from it. So if you were a person who had a research question that might be answered by a survey, for example, you could imagine sending your survey to the registrants of care. And as Van pointed out, care is off to a fantastic start. It's already more than 1,000 people and growing quickly, and it's diverse within its representation of AAPIs already, and will only increase in that way. So you could get a robust sample by surveying the people who are enrolled in care. Alternatively, you may have a specific question that you could answer inside of care. Do Chinese immigrants who are over 65 years of age have a specific attitude towards something? And I'll give an example in a moment. And that might be important preliminary data for you, or hypothesis generating data for you. Or you could imagine research questions that compare unique populations within care. Do Chinese older registrants differ from Korean older registrants, etc. So a number of different ways that one could imagine using the care registry as a data source for survey research. You could use it as part of your needs assessment or preliminary data. Maybe you want to write a grant and you don't have preliminary data from AAPI, and this could be a tremendous source of opportunity to collect such data. But certainly, we in our group have been using registries to do whole studies and ask unique questions within a registry. On the next slide, I just offer sort of an operationalization of how this might look. An investigator might have a hypothesis. I just kind of came up with this one off the top of my head. I'm not proposing anything today. But what if you wanted to know whether people who were born in this country differ from people who were born in another country in their attitudes towards participating in a prevention study? CARE would let you try to answer that question in one fell swoop in theory. You could define the sample you wish to survey within CARE based on their age or other variables that CARE collects. And you could develop an electronic survey that could be emailed through the CARE registry to folks who are willing to participate in your study and complete the survey. And then you could analyze it as you so choose. So this creates a pretty tremendous opportunity to do things in a much more accelerated timeline than we previously were able to do them in these kinds of diverse samples. And I think the strength of that is substantial. The next slide returns to the more traditional model of using a registry, which is to use it as a source of people that can be recruited to your prospective study. And again, there are a number of different ways one can imagine doing this and leveraging the strength that the CARE registry will provide to your study. You may have specific questions about Asian American Pacific Islanders, and the CARE registry could be the sole source of participants for your study. Maybe you need 30 diverse AAPIs in your area, and so you could, with the investigators in CARE, craft an appropriate query to identify people who might be eligible for your study and then try to recruit them. Again, you may have a larger study. You may have funding from a grant to do studies, and you want to make sure that your sample is as diverse, inclusive, and representative of our national population as possible, which would mean that you're going to try to achieve some sort of minimum representation of AAPI, and you may need additional sources of those participants. And so you could try to recruit from CARE to a larger study that includes other racial and ethnic populations as well. This may produce an opportunity for you to compare AAPI to other groups in your study, or you may design a study in which you're setting out to do that very specifically and using CARE to achieve accrual of one of your groups. And again, lastly, as stated in the survey slides, this registry produces a tremendous opportunity to try to compare specific groups for potential similarities or differences within the AAPI communities, which again, as Van pointed out, really represents tremendous diversity within that larger racial and ethnic group. I have a little asterisk here. I'm going to come back to it at the end. So to give an operational example of recruiting from CARE, perhaps you have designed a study where you're going to try to understand whether biomarker testing like PET scans or MRI scans and disclosure of that information, whether that's a barrier to participation specifically in a representative sample or specifically in AAPI. We did a study like this not so long ago, a few years ago. And CARE could be an outstanding source of recruitment for such a study. And you would have to, again, look closely at the data that are collected in the CARE registry to design a query and criteria for identifying people who might meet your eligibility criteria for your prospective study. And then you could try to recruit them into that study at your own site or wherever you do your research. The goal would be to produce more generalizable representative data, and CARE would almost certainly improve the larger diversity of your study. In my last slide, I kind of close with some caveats and conclusions, and I think there are some important things to remember about using a registry like CARE. One, it's not a community-based cohort. It's not a population-based. It is a community-based cohort. It's not a population-based cohort. So it's not an appropriate way to assess things like incidence or prevalence of disease. These are still convenience samples. These are still people who are willing to enroll in the registry. There is a sample bias that will come from that. And investigators using the care registry should remember that. That's actually why I, in my hypothetical on the previous slide, proposed a randomized study, because you want to think carefully about how you're designing your study to account for that potential sample bias. And no place would this be more important than if you were recruiting all of your AAPI from care and comparing them to, for example, a non-Hispanic white group recruited exclusively from a different source. So investigators need to take caution with that. That said, it is still a tremendous opportunity and resource to increase the diversity of your sample, to potentially ask novel questions about race and ethnicity, and to increase the value of our science collectively, which is really what CARE is all about, is accelerating our science, but making it more valuable, more representative, and more generalizable. And that's a tremendous opportunity for all of us. Thanks.
Thanks, Josh. I think we have some questions for you in the chat box. Let's see. So Tiffany asks, what mechanism is in place to chase registrants for responses to surveys like the ones Josh is suggesting?
Yeah, so clearly Tiffany has a substantial experience in recruiting, because she knows that you have to chase people. So, you know, I think that it's a good point, and I think that that's something that would want to be spelled out very carefully in consultation with the care investigators. Exactly how are you going to approach people and try to recruit them into your study? If it's a survey study, I think that's as simple as identifying the number of times that you're going to email people the link to your survey. I think we will consistently encourage people to offer incentives to people you're trying to recruit from care and make it easy for them to say yes to participating. That means what's in it for them and making it a low burden study to the extent that you're able. When you're recruiting prospectively, again, there need to be predefined stipulations about just how many times you're going to call people or mail them flyers and the like. But with registries like this, you know, the hope is that we've got a collection of people who are actually quite interested in research and are likely to say yes when approached.
Next question, also from Tiffany, is there a charge for commercial entities such as pharma to distribute surveys through CARE? So I could maybe answer that question. So as of now, there's no charge for any investigator to request access to the recruitment data. And that is because we still have an active grant. You know, to be honest, we're through this whole process. We'll see how long what are the resources and staff commitments required to, you know, to process each request. So we will be documenting that kind of information, which will then be important for future considerations. But currently, during the active portion of the grant, we are not charging, you know, for that information. I suspect that will change after our 24 grant ends, just to support the staff's time to process these kinds of requests.
Thanks for that answer, Van. I think offline later on, we should talk a little bit more about that. I have a little bit of advice for you from commercially similar patient survey organizations.
Yeah, we welcome any kind of, you know, information or guidance. You know, CARE is the first registry for most of us, except for Josh, in terms of you know, doing something like this, and it certainly is the you know, first and only registry that focuses only on AAPI. So we do want to, you know, we are open to any kind of information or knowledge and expertise in this area. Next question, are studies not related to aging or AD allowed to apply? Yes. Yeah, it doesn't have to be AD or aging. It's just how we started CARE. Is there any sense that we could burn out the registry participants? Like we should only do big studies and not small ones? So that's a good question. And this goes back to why we need the investigator to contact the registry participants within a month and report the progress of that. Is because we do need to know it could be that several investigators have similar eligibility criteria, inclusion criteria, for example, but certain people didn't want to participate in your study, and so we might want to put them back in that potential pool to be contacted from other researchers, and then knowing who is participating in your study, especially if there are considerations from the investigator. The investigator might also have a request, or not a request, but their study might be where they discourage or participants from participating in more than one study at the same time for whatever reason. Certainly those kinds of requests will be reviewed on case by case. So we do want to make sure that as best as we can from CARE's side, we allow equitable opportunities for our CARE registry participants to be contacted for potential research. So we are definitely going to be mindful of that in terms of number of contacts.
Dạ em, chị đang có meeting.
So the next question is, if we could share more about the strategies used to expand the registry to reach the goal. We have many strategies, many that you all are probably familiar with, the traditional, we have social media, we have community partners, we do a lot of community tailored presentations. So for example, tomorrow we have a presentation about CARE for Japanese community, and so last weekend we had one in Mandarin for Mandarin speaking. And so we do a variety of things. And how will it be maintained? That is, something that we are working on in terms of strategy about how to maintain this registry and in partnership with our community advisory board. Okay. Other questions? These are great questions. This is the time to ask. Okay, so we could go to the next, transition to the next, yeah. So we do have another question that it was mentioned that participants have the option to participate in studies. What other benefits do participants get by filling out the survey? It's really a benefit that they perceive and might perceive and might experience, which is knowing that they could potentially help represent their community. That's I think an important benefit to their community, their family. There's no other monetary benefit, if that's the question. We don't provide any of that or direct clinical care per se. It is a registry. So people could get contacted about potential research. Okay, so great questions, and we're happy to take more after this panel discussion. And so first up is Joon from NAPCA.
Hi, Ben. Thank you so much, everyone. A little bit about the National Asian Pacific Center on Aging, NAPCA. We were founded in 1979 because of a handful of activists who were influenced by the civil rights movement, recognized that services and resources for AAPI older adults were non-existent. And so our organization actually began because of a research grant from the ACL. And so we're a 41-year-old national nonprofit organization serving Asian American Pacific Islander older adults throughout the country. We focus very much so on economic security issues for older adults throughout the country. And we're excited to be a part of the CARE project because at NAPCA, we look at our mission as being formed because of a lack of a need in society. And I think all that we do within our organization is thinking through what we can do to not only advance the mission of caring for AAPI older adults and advocating for them, but what we need to do as an organization to ensure that we solve and accomplish our mission altogether. At the heart of our mission, and I would assume the mission of every nonprofit in the country or in the world, is underrepresentation. And I think why the CARE project is so meaningful and so important is because it addresses the lack of representation in research and health research for Asian American Pacific Islanders, and particularly the needs of older adults within our communities. We believe wholeheartedly that research informs policy, and policy can lead to systems change. And eventually, our hope is that our work through systems change can lead to equity and access for our the vulnerable communities and populations we serve. I wanted to share this clip with you all because I think it demonstrates and it kind of illuminates where we are as a country in terms of research and representation for Asian American Pacific Islanders in the country. As you all know, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. Everyone here in this webinar may have certain views about the methods and the ways in which the vaccines are being rolled out. And I wanted to draw your attention to this one story regarding this community partner here in the state of Washington by the name of Trang Tu. She is a caregiver, a single caregiver who provides for her mother who is in her 90s and also is a dementia patient. And when on the federal level from the CDC as well as on the state level, when they announced that priorities would be given to, I think it was first for older adults who are over the age of 75, but specifically in assisted living facilities. And that raised a lot of concerns from the community perspective because what Trang did was she wrote a letter to government officials in the state of Washington, utilizing some of the research that we had completed at NAPCA, where we were able to find that 42% of AAPI households participate in some form of caregiving as opposed to, I think it's about 22% of the national general population. And she was able to, with the support of over 200 community-based organizations here in the state of Washington, to work with the Department of Health here in the state of Washington to change their priorities in terms of vaccine access. As we all know, vaccine access and information to vaccines is still, still ambiguous, and we're still trying to figure out how to ensure that there's equity in terms of communities to be able to receive the vaccines as well. But what this article highlights is what happens when communities partner with agencies. But I also imagine if the country and our society had worked together to develop more research around the characteristics and the nuances behind all of this, the different subgroups within AAPI communities, I wonder how that research could have informed the way in which the stages for the vaccines were carried out. And so I know the next presenter, Quyen, will talk more about our role as nonprofit organizations in the CARE project. But I wanted to share this important article, and it's my firm belief that the role of CBOs and community-based organizations, our role is to be a bridge between the people you all need to hear from as researchers, and to be able to provide that platform for our community members so that their needs and their experiences can be heard by you. And our hope is that through this partnership, that we would be able to create systems change. There's a lot of talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion right now, but the sense that a lot of community folks have in terms of how popular the term DEI has become makes a lot of people within the community question whether it's coming from a place of genuine care and that it's also authentic as well. But I think what the CARE project highlights and is symbolic of is that it's an opportunity for not only communities but researchers to redefine how research is conducted in the country and also work together to create meaningful change. So thank you again for your interest in the CARE project. NAPCA is available to support any of you who are a part of this webinar. If you need connections to different community-based organizations and different AAPI subpopulations throughout the country, we're here to serve and assist. So please feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to support you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Joon. That was really great. Okay, so how about we go to Quyen? We can, again, we're going to have an opportunity for really a lot of questions after our two additional panelists. Quyen from ICAN.
Hi everyone. My name is Quyen Vuong. Thank you so much for your interest in CARE. Wow, it's a whooping, 55, 60 people came. So we're very excited about that. I want to share with you my excitement and why I decided to dive into this project with Vuong when she first brought it up to me, because as a community—
Vuong is me, by the way, Van. So
Van, sorry. When Van brought it up to me, because as a community-based service provider, we have to apply for grants. And everywhere we went, the funders always ask, do you have any research literature to support what you're claiming? And I was scratching my head and I said, I'm a community expert. I know what the people want and need. And the funder said, no, but I still want research. So all this time, it's been a struggle. I enjoy working with Van on the various research projects that creative ideas. But this one was especially important because it helped us build the foundation for many, many years to come. Now, let me share with you the struggles I have in working with the people and trying to engage them into research. Number one, they don't know what research is. Number two, they think, oh, that's something that's cooked up by the academia in the ivory tower. And so they just sitting there waiting to be handed services. That's it. So our goal is to help recruit them into research, recruit them, educate them about research, that research is about them and for them, but it has to come from them. Okay, so put that aside. Let me get back to ICAN's mission. ICAN's mission is to engage, inform, and inspire Vietnamese Americans to raise the next generation of caring leaders through three main program categories: humanitarian, social programs, and community-based research. Next, please. So here's our logo. And then our staff decided to you know, add some more clarifications or cool, cute tips on it. But you see the arch, we are about bringing families together, but you see that arch is about engaging the community, and that is the foundation of ICANN, of all of ICANN services. We were founded in the year 2000, and we stay as a prevention outfit, and not this, and intentionally do not want to go into intervention outfit, because those two are two different animals. You require different skills, different setup. So next, please. So like I said, you know, when the reason I joined Van on this is to give the Vietnamese Americans a voice in research. We're trying so hard on our end, on the social program ends, to give them a voice in social services. And then now it's a chance to partner with academia to give them a voice in research. So the key to care is the important relationship between the academic partners and the community partners like ICANN and NAPCA and all that. Next, please. I think this is an interesting slide because it shows you the different stages that we go through as a community partner to try to engage the community and recruit them for research. So basically, we have built over the last 20 years, we have built a variety, a portfolio of all kinds of workshops ranging from radio, you know, parenting workshops, community forum, children activities, women support group, you know, many different things, all to tell people about issues that impact their lives. So through that myriad of programs, then we build the relationship with the community, we build the trust with them, and then we slowly engage them in research. And it's through that effort that we started to build the, you know, a base of people who believe in us, who started to see the light at the end of the tunnel, what research is about, and to see their role in research. So in between, the important thing is this. It's not like, you know, how do we have the space? How do we maintain the space? How do we sustain the space? And how do we build it up so that every time, you know, Van or other researchers come around, they have a project, we have to be there to introduce the project to our community members. So because of that, we have to continually engaging them in the different activities in order to maintain that trust. And that's what Joon was talking about. It's extremely important to build a lasting impact and trust with the community, because CBOs are the bridge. Like Joon said, the bridge between, you know, connecting the community who are the subjects of research, but also the beneficiary of research, and then the academia who have the knowledge and the magic wand to really think things through and sort things out for us. So that's what to me is important. And I'm going to stop right here so that we can answer your questions.
Thanks, Quyen. Maybe actually, yeah, this could be a good time for a few minutes or a couple questions, if there are any, for our two community partner panelists here, Quyen from ICANN and Joon from NAPCA. Any questions in regards to anything, but really from their perspective, community partnerships? You can feel free to raise your hand or put a message in the chat. One thing I just wanted to add is that how grateful we are as the research partners in care for CBOs like ICAN and NAPCA. Through this whole experience, again, this registry is a new idea, right? And a new innovative idea for our communities. And I myself, and I can probably speak on behalf of others, other researchers have learned a great deal about, you know, things to consider, whether big or small, you know, and everything from having to take into consideration the sort of political meaning or context for a term that might be triggering for some people, or you know, how best to introduce what research is, and even the raffles or the raffles that we have here, we borrowed that from ICAN, you know, so how to be responsive and pivot in this world that we live in now, which is offering very limited in person. So we're doing a lot of things online, right? So, so we have a question. How do the most recent speakers feel about the early enrollment success of CARE? Do you anticipate the same trajectory going forward? So maybe Joon and Quyen, you can both answer that question.
Early enrollment success. For CARE, we actually have to really push on a one-on-one approach, because, you know, in this day and age, people are just so afraid, so distracted, so concerned about COVID that they may not want to hear, you know, the message. So first, every forum that we have, we advertise about CARE and Compass. Compass is another study that we are doing. It's about capturing the impact of COVID-19 on people's life. So we have to resort to talking to them individually. And that helps a lot. So the media, ethnic media also helps to raise awareness, but because they're so preoccupied with COVID, they don't want to think about anything else. So it's, you know, goes up and down. Some days we got lucky. During the election, we got yelled at. Why are you talking about CARE and COVID when we have like so important issues here? It's a life or death. It's a matter of life or death for our country. So then we stop for about a week, and then we restart when people calm down. So it's been a struggle. It's not easy.
I can just add on to what Gwen was talking about. I think in normal circumstances, the ability to enroll large amounts of individuals into a project like this would be far more easier, to her point. I think, though, what's fascinating and speaks to the importance of the CARE project is that I think we're seeing high volumes of people show interest, and they're showing interest particularly because of the representation that is made possible, the access to representation that this project actually has. I think when you frame it and consider the project in the form of, this is the first AAPI registry and the effort, the first effort of its kind to do something of this scale, it's very meaningful. And to be able to have conversations about that, I think somebody asked a question of, you know, are we finding that people are sharing with, you know, their you know, I think their friends, and it is. I think people want to share what's going on through this project because it's really important, and they see that they see it specifically, or especially so, because of the condition the country has been in the past 4 years, but also I think as it relates specifically to AAPI communities and what a lot of the older adults have experienced throughout the COVID. I think these things are also points that people are considering as well.
Thanks, Quyen and Joon. So we'll have an opportunity again for a lot more discussion and questions. And so last but not least, our last presenter is Dr. Dolores Gallagher-Thompson.
Hi, and thank you again, everyone, for being here and for being so interested in what we're doing in care. So I'm going to talk about, building on what Quyen and Joon have talked about, I'm going to talk about how this community academic partnership can work when it pertains to engaging family members of someone who has cognitive loss, memory loss, significant memory loss. Next slide, please. Family members may not think of themselves as caregivers because these changes often happen with age. However, caregiving is an important construct and one that we'd like to give you a definition that is widely used in the federal agency as far as funding and so forth is concerned. It refers to people who provide unpaid care to a relative or friend 18 years or older, so not a child or an adolescent, to help them take care of themselves. This is because the care recipient often has one or more chronic medical conditions that makes it difficult for them to do their own self-care. And some have significant cognitive impairment, which could be due to stroke, Alzheimer's disease, or other illnesses that affect the brain. And it's usually those individuals who need the most assistance from family members. And that's where the title of caregiver really comes into play. Next slide, please. Caregivers do a wide variety of things, depending upon the illness of their loved one, what stage they are in the illness, and depending on what other kinds of care they might have available. But most help with personal needs like dressing and bathing and so forth. They also help with household chores, with managing medication, transportation, practical things like arranging for outside services when necessary. So caregiving tasks span a broad range depending upon the illness of the person being cared for. Now, in a recent study that was published by the National Alliance on Caregiving, that compared Asian caregivers to non-Hispanic white, as well as African American and Latinx caregivers, it was found that the Asian American Pacific Islanders more likely lived with the person they were caring for. They often found that there were issues with their employment outside of the home, and many, in fact, had to take a leave of absence. These would be the younger caregivers, the ones who would be employed outside the home. They report their role to be highly emotionally stressful. And at the same time, even though many of the caregivers who responded to this particular survey were born and educated in the US, they still preferred materials that would give them information and help them develop some new skills for caregiving. They preferred the information to be in their native language, in their original language, not necessarily in English. So this is good. This is a good start. There were several hundred Asian American Pacific Islander caregivers in this study that I'm reporting, but compared to what we know about most other groups, it's a drop in the bucket. It's a very small knowledge base at this time. Next slide, please. Most of the research that's been done so far on caregivers has focused on the negative impacts of caregiving on physical and mental health. So most caregivers report they're tired, they have less energy, they have problems sleeping, they don't take care of their own health, and some have stress-related conditions like high blood pressure that get worse with the ups and downs of caregiving. And from a psychological point of view, stress is the big one. And we all know that stress can be both beneficial and detrimental depending upon the amount of it and how we respond to it. But in many caregivers, particularly of those with cognitive impairment, there's increased loneliness and social isolation because they're just not able to do a lot of the things that they used to be able to do together as a family. And there can be increased conflict over how to care for the elder. And lastly, a number of studies have found that about 50% of caregivers report increased depression, symptoms of anxiety and worry, and frustration. So next slide, please. Altogether, you could say that there's a lowered sense of well-being. However, this is not the whole story. And what some studies have found is that there really are a number of positive aspects of caregiving as well, that if the researchers don't ask about them, they will never find out. So some of these positive aspects could be that the caregiver learns about some of their own strengths. They're able to give back to family members who gave so much to them. They may find that this is really a very important role that they take on. And one of the factors that seems to explain how some caregivers do very well with caregiving, and even though they have stress, they manage it very well, is because of resilience. So resilience means being able to deal effectively and flexibly with stressful situations. And this is something we can learn. We can learn over time as we're exposed to these different situations. In the caregiving world, resilience is associated with being able to see both the positive aspects of the situation and also respond effectively to the negative or the more stressful. So it's not either or. And this is important in the context that we're talking today, because some cultural values may very well support resiliency. And in the AAPI communities, filial piety is strongly held among many groups. But research-wise, we don't have a lot of information. One of the few studies that's been done was done with Chinese American caregivers, and it found that those who held strongly to this belief were individuals who were able to have that balance between the positive and the stressful aspects of caregiving. Whereas those who only held to it a little bit often reported the most stress. So this cultural value can be very important, but again, it's something that we might not ask about, cultural values. In most studies of caregiving that have been done up to this point, no one has asked about it. So this is kind of a unique finding. Next slide, please. So how can we foster caregiver research within the care registry? Well, it's important. I know I'm preaching to the choir. You already have heard this, but it's important for everyone to realize that the existing research on caregiving does not include very many AAPIs. They have not been well represented. There are a number of reasons for this, partly because of the cultural and linguistic diversity between groups, as well as the historical differences, so that you cannot really group these together. You need to study each group on its own, and that can be raise practical issues such as finding the bilingual and bicultural well-trained faculty and staff who are able to develop the projects and then carry them out. So there are some reasons why AAPIs have been underrepresented, but it's time to change that. And we believe that the way to do it is through this partnership between the researchers and the community-based organizations. So you've heard from Quyen and Joon about how community-based organizations really know their clientele. They represent different specific subgroups in some cases, or the larger AAPI population in other cases. They actually work with the population that researchers want to study. So including them makes perfect sense and clearly is the direction we need to go. Next slide, please. Here's an example of how we might do that. How is this going to play out in actuality? So supposing we wanted to do a survey or maybe some interviews with caregivers to find out what are some of the unique stressors that AAPI groups might experience, and what are some of their unique coping strategies. So it may be, for example, that since many AAPI households are multi-generational, caregiving is spread out or shared among a number of family members, and there isn't a primary caregiver. However, in almost all the existing research that's been done so far, we identify a primary caregiver, and that's the individual who answers the questions. Well, with AAPI families, it may be that we need to be looking more broadly and be inclusive of other family members who have important roles to play. But we won't find out unless we ask. So that leads me to the next point about asking the right questions. As a non-AAPI researcher, I could just keep repeating the same questions that have been asked for the last 20 years and not bring a fresh look, a fresh perspective to the situation. But if I'm partnering with the community agencies we've been talking about, they will help. They will tell me what we should be asking. They know what some of the issues are, what the caregivers face on a day-to-day basis, what resources they have available, and what some of the needs are that are not being met. So these are the folks who can help us understand and develop the right questions. The next slide, please. In addition to finding out more about specific stressors and ways of coping and unmet needs, it's also, I believe, very important to look at intervention research. This is what I've spent most of my career doing, and I can share with you that it's a challenging area of research. It's hard to develop programs and then test them out. What's been done so far, again, the last 20 years or so, the majority of what we know, the research has been done with non-Hispanic white. Then to next largest group would be African American, and then Latinx. And again, very few of the existing evidence-based interventions have been carried out with AAPI groups of caregivers. So this leads us to some very important questions, I think, which is, do we take these existing evidence-based programs? There's now quite a collection of them, and they are available. Information about them is available on a couple of key websites, as well as information about training and cost and so forth. So do we take them and simply apply them to the various AAPI groups that we might be interested in working with? That's one way. Do we culturally tailor them so that we are trying to at least pay respectful attention to important aspects of the culture? An example of that work is a project that Dr. Park and I, along with others, completed a couple of years ago with Vietnamese American caregivers, where we took an evidence-based program, and it was culturally tailored, and it was successful. In certain respects, it was quite successful. So that's great, but is that always going to be the case? Or might it be better to really start from scratch, to really design a novel program, a program that is responsive to the cultural needs and the cultural preferences, rather than taking something that was developed for others and seeing how we can tweak it for these particular groups. It's also becoming more and more evident in the intervention literature that different relationships, caregivers in different relationships respond to different interventions, different types of programs and services. So what adult daughters need, for example, is not the same as what a spouse caregiver will respond to. So this is an important current area of interest in research, and I think it would be a great topic to be examining here. Would be how does that differ in specific AAPI groups? So a great deal of work remains to be done. And it's our belief that by developing these collaborative relationships, we'll be able to design the right kind of interventions and then implement them in the community with the appropriate caregivers. So where does the care registry come in? Well, the care registry asks about who is a caregiver and caregiving for persons with what kinds of illnesses. So I think Van mentioned in the very beginning that a percentage of the individuals who are enrolled so far have indicated that they are caregivers. And within that, a smaller percentage are caregivers of persons with significant memory problems. So the beginnings of the sample is there, the beginnings. But while this is happening and the numbers are increasing, is the time for the community and academic collaborations to be built so that when we have greater numbers, we'll be able to really start right then and there and not lose time. My last slide is just a simple, a very straightforward example of how this might work. So we collaboratively developed the online or phone survey. So asking the right questions, figuring out what they are and how best to frame them so that they are likely to get a response and not be seen as offensive in any way. Then contacting the caregivers, various methods for that, again, may depend upon the particular group or the degree of proficiency with English, the comfort with the internet and the use of computers and so forth. So how do we contact them and then encourage them to respond to the survey? We may need to use a variety of methods. Some might be interested in doing more in-depth interviews, and this is always a good thing to do to really expand qualitative research as well as the quantitative side of things so that you can get a deeper understanding of what it is that caregivers are experiencing and what they think could help them, what their unmet needs are. And finally, something I think is very important is the feedback loop, namely that once you have results, then you share them with your community partners who have been with you every step of the way so that you can jointly plan the next phase of the research. So in my experience, these are long-term relationships. Once that you establish a good collaborative relationship, it's going to continue for probably a decade because that's, it takes a while to do these studies and to get the results and feedback to the community. So I thank you for your attention, and I think I might have a slide that, gives my email. I'm very happy to communicate with anyone who's interested in talking more about caregiver-focused research and care, the care registry. So thanks.
Okay, thanks, Dolores. So just as a friendly reminder, we're going to send this out in email as well, but we ask you to fill out a very brief evaluation survey for us. And if you could copy and paste the link onto the chat, again, we'll also email this to you, but in case you're interested in doing it now. And for those, we will have a lot of raffles actually for the evaluation survey. Randomly, of course. And so, please do fill this out. And then we now open the, again, Zoom floor for questions. Feel free to unmute yourself or type in any questions that you may have for any one of us here in regards to whatever we talked about. So we have a question in the chat for ICAN and NAPCA regarding the ICAN programs and NAPCA projects. What are some examples of strategies or incentives that were provided in the past that worked and helped to drive participation? So maybe Joon or Quyen, you could answer that question in the chat.
I think in terms of strategy, I know one personally that has worked really well in terms of driving participation is leveraging ethnic media. It's a little different now in the time of the COVID-19 in the pandemic because the way in which we conduct press conferences and work with our media partners is different now than what it used to look like prior to pre-COVID. So I think that's worked really well. I think, you know, one thing that in terms of partnerships with media partners, it's something that we've been very intentional about. And what our media partners are really great at is if we're able to articulate and share with them the meaning behind how this impacts our communities, they're able to support us with how they message the information when it does go out to media, you know, through the different media channels. That's really helped. I think anything that builds community is always helpful. So, you know, another strategy that's been very positive is to create a space and environment where, you know, there might be food and beverages where people can feel like they can enjoy the space that we create among them and their friends and stuff like that. And so I think those are two strategies that we're looking forward to really utilize hopefully when the pandemic comes to a close. I mean, hopefully the next year or so. I see Quyen laughing, but I'll pass it on to her.
Okay, so in terms of, you know, I laughed because I don't know when it's gonna happen, but in terms of ethnic media, to me, I always think of ethnic media as the tool to generate awareness. And in some ways, it lends credibility, legitimacy to the program so that but it's us driving, it's us reaching out to the clients, it's us posting on our Facebook and, you know, emailing things out that really gets them to take action. We may have to call them and talk to them too. So you still need to drive the ethnic media to generate awareness, but that alone may or may not drive people to take action to join the event or to join the research. Now, if obviously incentives always help, you know, $10, $15. And then we always have raffles we have to have raffles all the time. But then later on, I realized that it's for the fun of it. It's for the social connection. It's for people to laugh, you know, and they feel good. And it's for lucky money when the New Year time comes around. So that's just, and in some ways, that's the cheaper way than to pay for the ethnic media. Right? You have you put out like $100 worth of raffles, they'll come. Paying the media is $300-400 for 10 minutes. Or, you know, in this day and age right now, they charging $30 per minute. So that's my answer.
And if I could add to that, you know, yeah, the importance of providing incentives for caregivers to participate in research. It's very, you know, it's very much so because research for many individuals has kind of that negative connotation, like, oh God, I'm going to answer all these kind of questions. I don't know if I'm going to get anything out of it. You know, it's going to take time. What am I going to do with my loved one while I'm answering these questions. And so it can seem like an awful lot of trouble to people rather than being seen as something that can really help them, benefit them. So we've always done that, built in the incentives during the participation in the program. And I think that really helps to keep people interested and motivated, and to not feel that we're taking advantage of them,
Right.
that somehow we're using them in some way. I think that's a real, it's a tough one to overcome sometimes, because there are examples certainly where people have been used in research and not used well, used in negative ways. And people remember that. They may not remember all the good ways in which research has happened and has helped people. So incentives can be part of the research as well, is what I'm trying to say, the ongoing project, not just the recruitment, or the initial setup. Yeah.
And so here we have our acknowledgement page, and we do want to acknowledge the NIA for their generous support with the R24 grant, and all of our co-investigators, staff, and community advisory board. So thank you again for your time, and we'll remain here for a few minutes if anybody have any questions for us. But thank you, and we look forward to receiving a consultation request so you can collaborate with CARE and hopefully use our data request or recruitment registry data for your own respective projects. And again, we really encourage you to collaborate with community partners. There are many in CARE, not the only ones, of course, but any community partner. Thank you to all the speakers as well, to Josh and Dolores, to Quyen and Joon, and also to our staff. I might miss all the names, so forgive me, staff, but there's Marion and Jeanette and Mai, and I think a few others that I might be missing, but thank you.